Hello and welcome to Harlingen CISD's Centennial Celebration Show. This show is part of our year-long celebration of Harlingen CISD's 100th anniversary as a school district. I'm your host, Alan L. Shire. We'll have interviews with citizens of Harlingen with a story to tell. Each guest will share their stories of the early years of Harlingen and the evolution of our public school system. Joining us today is Ms. Lee Means. She's a former principal and board member. Thanks for being with us on the show today.
Oh, you're welcome.
You know, I said former principal and a board member, but you've been a teacher. You've been a little bit of everything. You've given the district so many years of your life, and that's why we're just so thankful to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I loved the school district. It was my life.
Well, we know that, and you know, we've got a school named after you, and we're just so proud of you. You've done so much. You've dedicated so many years that it really is appropriate to have you on the show today.
I loved everything I did, Alan.
Well, we're going to take the entire community on a little ride. We're going to go back to the day that you first came to Harlingen. I want you to describe that. I want you to tell us about your family, what it looked like. I want you to talk about what did Harlingen look like when you first got here.
Okay.
And then we're gonna take them on a story that's going to expand a number of years, and hopefully this will really give a good flavor for how we've evolved, how we've come along over these number of years.
When Alan asked when I first came here, I came here in July of 1947. My father was a Baptist minister, and he had just been called to be the minister of the Baptist church in Combs. Well, having just graduated from college, and at the ripe old age of 19, I really thought the valley was the devil's jumping off place. It took them 3 weeks to get me to come down here. And then I decided I would go to the University of Texas to work on my master's degree, and did enroll and went to school for about a month. But having graduated from Mary Hardin Baylor with its, at that time, 400 plus students, I felt like a little country girl in the big city at the University of Texas. I did not enjoy it at all. So I wanted to come home, and at that time, I had not ever planned to teach school. In fact, I all but stomped the floor as a senior and said, I'll never teach school. Well, in those days, when you moved to the Valley, you didn't have a whole lot of choices as a woman with a degree. You could be a secretary, which I didn't know how to be. You could be a nurse, for which I was not trained. You could be a clerk, or you could be a teacher, and I was not certified, even though I had a degree. However, at that time, Wilson Tract Independent School District, which is what it was that year, needed a business teacher, and that was my major. They hired me sight unseen based upon my father's interview and my college transcript. So I started teaching at Wilson High School in October of 1947. I was 20 years old. I didn't think I was big enough or smart enough to be teaching high school kids. They did everything from asking me for dates to one of them telling me where I could take that junior play and go, and it was warmer than the Valley. But I did get hooked on teaching, though I had never expected to. And during that year, the Wilson Independent School District became a part of the Harlingen Consolidated Independent School District. And not wanting to teach in high school, I opted to go to elementary school in the fall. And at that time, we had a school at the air base named Colonial Acres Elementary School. It was in some of the old classroom buildings out there. So I started teaching second grade there, and elementary stuck. I stayed there then for the rest of my years, except the time that I spent operating the Guidance Center.
What did the school district look like back then?
We didn't have all the schools we have now. We had the outlying ones, which were Stewart Place and Wilson and Dishman at Combs. And I was trying to think of earlier, Alan, how many schools we had. I know we had Austin, we had Bowie, we had Sam Houston, which was downtown. We had Travis, which was where it is now, but it was an entirely different building. We didn't have Treasure Hills, we didn't have Bonham, and I'm not sure. I know we must have had Crockett because I can remember some of our board members having gone to school over there. I don't believe we had Zavala because that building plan is very similar to Lamar and Bonham. So that may be it. I may be forgetting one, but that was pretty much it. We had a much smaller enrollment, but we had very interested parents, especially the parents we had at Colonial Acres. At that time, Lemoyne Gardens was not a housing project. There were people that lived there whose kids went to Colonial Acres, and then when we built Bonham, which was built to house those of us at Colonial Acres, well, they came to Bonham with us. When they closed the school, and we were the last thing to close at the air base, and that would have been in January of 1952, they moved a teacher and a classroom anywhere in town that there was an empty classroom. My kids and I happened to go to Travis, and I stayed there the rest of that year and one more year while they were building Bonham. It was a very interesting time to have us all scattered all over town. So the school district was much, much smaller, of course, in those days.
How many teachers were at a campus, or was there an average back then? How many middle schools, how many high schools at that point?
2 middle schools, what was Gay Junior High and Vernon at that time when I first started, and then of course Coakley was the next one built. 1 high school.
1 high school?
No Keys Academy, no Secondary Alternative Center, no early college high school, Harlingen High School. And then when they built Bonham, in fact, my kids and I were at Travis the rest of that year, and then the next year we were in portable buildings over where the media center is while they were building our schools, and we were on half-day sessions. And I did my teaching half-day, and then I worked for the city manager the other half-day because his secretary was gone. And then they got Bonham built, and we moved into Bonham in November of 1953. And the only 2 original teachers that I know that are left are Betty Ferris and myself. Betty was first grade and I was second grade.
Can you talk about the kinds of things that were taught in the classroom, and then maybe compare that to what's taught today, what the typical day was like for students and for a teacher in those years?
In those years, we taught everything. All of the basic subjects, which people still do. We also did our own music, our own art, and our own PE, and that was just wonderful. You know what a great job most women elementary teachers would do of PE. So it was a great thing when we got PE teachers. I remember the first one I remember at Bonham is Larry Galbraith. And it was great to have a PE teacher. We still did not have a music teacher nor an art teacher. And so you were responsible for teaching everything to your kids. I know the teachers worry now about having to spend so much time teaching tax. We didn't have that, but we did have standardized achievement tests, and we did work on that, and we did want our kids to do well on those achievement tests. So that part is the same. The test, different test, but a same type situation, though it did not determine whether they were going to be promoted or not. But the PE teachers and the art teachers and the music teachers, and to have a full-time nurse on your campus, and to have a counselor on your campus, we didn't have those luxuries.
How many students were at an elementary campus back then?
I'm not sure the number for the whole campus, Alan, but somebody gave me a copy of my classroom picture way back in those days. In fact, I think John Topp is in that picture, and I had about 35 students.
You know, I think we have that picture on our website, on our Centennial celebration website, and I'm not sure if it was John Topp or you that sent me the picture.
I might have, because I did get out a lot of pictures that I could find when Bonham was having a birthday party and gave them to Mrs. Silstorf. And I think she gave them back to me, hopefully. But many, many more students than now. And my classroom always did well because I loved it and loved them.
You mentioned what it was like for a woman in the Rio Grande Valley in those years, and maybe it was like that throughout Texas or throughout the country in terms of the kinds of opportunities. We've come a long way, baby.
Oh, yes.
Dr. Linda Wade was our superintendent, our previous superintendent, and so things have really changed. Do you want to talk about that change and how that evolution occurred in the school district?
I don't think of any one particular thing, Alan. I think it just kept on building. When I first started teaching here, believe it or not, my principal at Colonial Acres was a woman. It was Mrs. Hornaday. And I believe she went from Colonial Acres to Austin after she left us, after Bonham was built. She didn't go to Bonham with us and stayed at Austin until she retired. But there were few women principals in those days, so that has evolved along the way, thank goodness. Women make great principals.
I absolutely agree.
And, of course, Dr. Wade was our first woman superintendent. And really and truly, I can remember very few women on the school board in my years here. I do remember 3 of them, all of whom are dead: Pat Wyndham and Ann Morris and Dr. Schultz and Kathy Rickard. And truthfully, those are the only women that I remember being on the board until the days now when we have Verna Young, who was one of my students, my first year to teach school. She was a senior at Wilson Tract High School. And Jerry Fleury.
I think I have that picture also.
You might. Yeah. So things of that in that way have changed a lot, and only for the better.
That's wonderful. Now you really had a lot of firsts. I might be mistaken on this, but weren't you the first woman in Rotary in Harlingen?
Yes, I was.
So you've really done a lot. Now today we have an elementary school named after you. How does that feel?
It's a very great honor. It's a very humbling thing, but it is a very great honor. And to me, Alan, it's not Lee Means. It's the fact that I was an educator in this school district for 48 years, which no one else has done. So therefore, to me, it's an honor for all teachers.
Well, it's an honor for the community, though, to recognize those people that have given so much back to the community in terms of education, and for somebody like yourself that's given so many years in so many different ways, not just the school district. And I know that you don't like to toot your horn, but I would like to hear I want to let our community know about the other kinds of things that you've been involved in that's made a difference in our community, whether the Rio Grande Valley or the community.
In Harlingen, my church, First United Methodist Church, Harlingen Boys and Girls Club, Literacy Center, the Hospital Board, Youth Leadership Harlingen, Rio Grande Boy Scouts. Gosh, Alan, I'm afraid I'll forget. I didn't write all of this down, you know. But a lot of what I do has to do either with kids or education, both of which are near and dear to my heart. And as far as other things, it was a distinct honor to be named the elementary principal of the year for the state of Texas in 1990, and also distinguished elementary principal from Texas on the national level. It was a wonderful honor. One of the funny things that happened during that time, I was going to a regional Department of Education meeting to get a plaque, which all of us did as representing our states. And the taxi driver kept looking in the rearview mirror and kept looking, and he finally said, "Ma'am, are you the governor?" And I said, "No, I'm not. That's Ann Richards." But my hair was the color of hers, and it was somewhat in those days the style of hers. So he thought he had the governor in his taxi, but he didn't. So that was just one of the funny things I remember from those days, but it was a significant honor. That and the naming of the school are definitely two honors that I would never have thought I would achieve.
Well, we've already interviewed ex-mayor Colonel Card, and we've interviewed Dr. Cesar Maldonado.
Oh,
So you're our third interview, and we hope that we have a lot of interviews in the months, and we're going to do this all year long. So that if there are people out there watching today, and you know somebody that's been involved in our school system, they can take us back a few years and help us better understand how the school district has come along. We encourage you to call in and let us know about those stories, and we'd like to see more people on our show.
well, one of my memories of Mr. Maldonado, I had his children in my school at Long, and our PTA and parents and some businesses helped us to get our pavilion. We didn't have many pavilions in the school district at that time. And Mr. Maldonado, he was not Dr. Maldonado then, he and his business, Texas, was it Texas State Steel? It was Texas Tech Steel, were one of the businesses that helped us to do that. And also Dr. Sid Brown from R.N. Jones Insurance Agency. We were extremely proud of our pavilion because then in bad weather, the kids could go out there and play and still sort of be outside.
Oh, absolutely. I can imagine that's one of those milestones that you think about
You
now.
bet.
What are
Loved it.
some of the other milestones that you can relate to us, starting again back from when you first came to Harlingen, what the school system looked like? What were some of the milestones that you feel like made the biggest difference?
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning. When did
We
that
had
take
no,
place?
I don't know what year that was. I can just remember the Cardettes being out in parking lots putting flyers on people's windshields and helping to get that passed. I think maybe they knew that if we got it, then it would soon get to the high school, or the other way around. But they did. Maybe we already had it in high school, but they got out and helped to get that passed. So air conditioning was a biggie, not only the heat, but the gnats that could and did come in. And that's one. And then when we got the multi-purpose buildings, we thought we were really living because we didn't have anything close to having a gymnasium. On bad days, the kids had to stay in the cafeteria, and then when it's time for lunch, they had to go to the classrooms. And of course, we don't have but one or two PE teachers at a time, so the teachers oftentimes had to go back and help out when the kids had to stay in the classroom. So that's a biggie. And then staff-wise, I've already mentioned to have your own nurse and your own counselor and music and PE. And we still don't have elementary art teachers. The teachers still do that their own, but having music and PE is a big boost. So those are definitely milestones to me.
What do you think about the school district now, as we've really come a long way this year in terms of hiring instructional facilitators, content area specialists, an evaluator to help us focus on data? We've got an entire curriculum department now that we really didn't have before.
I think it's wonderful, and of course I have not had any experience with it, so I only know that those names are there. But I think that anything which will build the instructional program is certainly a boost. That's what we're all about, helping our kids to do well in academics. So I think anything that's going to strengthen that is wonderful, and I'm anxious to see how that works out. But I was also extremely proud of the number of exemplary schools that we had this year.
7 schools.
I think it's absolutely
5
wonderful.
more than last year.
And of course, one of those was Long Elementary, and that one's near and dear to my heart, too.
So let's go back and recount then the number of campuses that you were either a teacher, an administrator. So,
Okay. Wilson as a teacher when it became part of the Harlingen School District. Colonial Acres, which is no longer there. And then I was at Travis while our school was being built. And then I went to Bonham. And then I took some time off briefly at the times when we adopted our children. So I was at Lamar for a while, and then I went back to Bonham. From Bonham, I went into, we had an administrative internship one semester when Dr. Littleton was here, and I did that. And then I worked in staff development with Sue Bennett, and from there I went to open the Guidance Center and was there for a year and a half, and that was quite an experience. And from there, Mr. Segura accepted me as being what was called a helping teacher in those days. It's actually our assistant principals now. And Mr. Segura gave me an opportunity to do that. And when he moved downtown to personnel, then I became principal at Wilson. And I stayed there for 5 years and left there only to go to open Long. Stayed at Long 11 years. And I think if I put it all down and checked it, that would add up to 48.
Now, it seems to me, and I was in the school district, I believe back then, I seem to remember a picture of somebody on the rooftop. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, when you ask what you remember about, I don't know, you'd say funny or what. I got myself into that by opening my mouth at the wrong time. We had a PTA meeting at or under our pavilion because I wanted the parents to see it. The city very graciously moved bleachers over there for the parents to sit, and I always reported to the parents what had been going on that month. And in those days, your attendance in 2 specific months were what they based your funding on. And it was during one of those months, I think it was October, well, I know it was October, and we were meeting under our pavilion because we were so proud. And in my report, I said I had done everything there was to do in that school, including mopping floors, other than getting on the roof to check for roof leaks. And if we ever had perfect attendance, I might even do that. Well, I went off to Rotary. I came back from Rotary, and my secretary, Sefi Longoria, met me in the hall holding this orange jumpsuit. And she said, "Put this on. We have to go do something." I thought, what in the world? But I did it, since that was Sefi. I put it on. She hustled me out the door on the south side, and I had not noticed it when I came in. The whole student body was out there. The fire department was out there. The superintendent was out there. PTA, I don't know how many people were there. It seemed like a multitude. The fire department had a ladder already placed against the building up to the roof. And guess who had to eat her words? I went up the ladder to the roof. Going up was not nearly as scary as coming down. And there was a superintendent standing up there waiting for me, bless his heart. So that was the story of opening my mouth and having to eat my words. But the kids loved it.
Well, thank you so much.
And we had
for sharing.
100% attendance that day, so it was worth it.
See, I mean, those are some milestones that our principals can learn, from today.
Mrs. Lovell and I had a little habit of getting in the car and going out and pick up kids that had not come to school that morning. But I don't think we had that day. They were all there on their own.
Fantastic.
Oh.
Now, let's talk about your family, your kids, and maybe you can help us compare and contrast what it was like for your kids going through the school system then and what it's like for young parents that might be watching today, just to compare and contrast for example, when you first moved down here, were there buses? How did kids get to school? When your kids were first in the school system, how did they get to school? What were some of the major differences that you might compare and contrast between then and today?
Yes, we did have school buses, Alan, but we did not have school buses. I know right now within the neighborhood it's only if it's a route that's dangerous. But our kids either walked to school, rode their bikes to school, or the parents took them to school at Bonham, and also going back home. As far as being in the school district, my kids were at Bonham, and I was teaching at Bonham. And sometimes that's a little difficult for the kids. It was a little difficult for Mark one day because I walked out the door, and who's standing outside his classroom door but my son? And I just waited till I had a chance to talk to his teacher. And she said, well, really, I felt kind of sorry for Mark. She had been absent the day before, and she had been told that her kids were not very well behaved. So when she got there and found that out, she said, the first one that talks is going out that door. Well, he was the first one that talked. So he had to go stand outside the door, and his teacher knew very well that I would come out the door and see him there, and that was all the punishment that it would need. So sometimes it's kind of hard if your kids are in the school with you, but on the other hand, it makes it easier for teachers to get their kids to school and to know that they're there and okay. And Mr. McKeon was our principal, and he did let our kids stay on the playground. I don't remember them staying in the classroom with us, but he would let them stay out on the playground the 30 minutes that it took before the end of school, and we could take them home. But in those days, it seems like many more kids rode their bikes and walked than we have happening now. But the school buses did pick up in the rural areas, in those areas far enough away from school, but not quite like now. When you go down Sunshine Strip and you see that multitude of buses out there, no, we didn't have that many buses.
What are some of the other things that you might compare and contrast between how it was then and what's changed today?
Of course, the numbers, the classroom sizes. If I'd had 22 children in my classroom, I probably would have thought I had died and gone to heaven. The testing is different. There's so much more emphasis on it and pressure on the teachers. Some things we used to do, we cannot do anymore. We had elementary track meets, and the kids absolutely loved it. But then we were told that was against UIL rules, so we had to drop that. And even then, we had elementary academics, and we called it, I think probably, I don't know whether we called it elementary academics or elementary UIL, but we had it. And we had participation from kinder on, because oftentimes I had the younger group in my school and the older group, the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, maybe 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th would be at Treasure Hills. And I know that we don't do that with the younger children anymore, the pre-Ks and really young elementary. Academics, we still stressed, even though we didn't have TAKS. We had Iowa test of basic skills, or maybe California test of basic skills. We did the testing. We did not have the pressure on us that you cannot be promoted if you cannot read on a certain level at 3rd grade. Cafeterias have changed a great deal. We did not serve breakfast in those days, and we did not have the free lunch program. For so many children to be fed. A lot of kids brought their lunch, even in those days. And I can remember on a personal basis when the lunch program was brought into Harlingen. My husband was an administrator in the school district then. And one of our kids, I think Laura, said, well, am I going to be on free lunch? I don't eat very much. But no, she wasn't on free lunch. As for my family, I have 2 children. Mark, who works for Southwest Airlines and lives in Sugar Land, works at Hobby. Laura, who is a 3rd grade teacher at Rodriguez. I'm sorry, Laura, and Mrs. Started to say Mrs. Mew or Mrs. Gonzalez. That's why I'm thinking Gonzalez. The principal is Gonzalez. She is at Rodriguez, 3rd grade teacher, and loves it, and have 2 beautiful grandchildren. A 19-year-old granddaughter who is a sophomore at the University of Houston. She is very much into Taekwondo and has competed both nationally and internationally. We hope to go to Las Vegas on Valentine's Day to see her compete there. And then we have a precious little 4-year-old grandson who was born in China but lives in Harlingen and attends school at St. Albans. My husband was a graduate of Harlingen High School, as were both my kids. So that's the story of my family in Harlingen.
Well, it sounds like everybody's done well in Harlingen.
I think so.
Your kids have done well?
They have.
How do you feel as a parent about the way that the Harlingen system has prepared your kids?
I think very well. Mark was very involved in sports. And of course, to me, sports is not just about running up and down the field. The coaches teach character and they teach sportsmanship, which are very important to me, and the kids do learn that. And when Mark was in ninth grade, his coach was Larry Nyquist, and one of the requirements with the football players, they had to take turns working in the cafeteria. But they didn't complain because they got to eat more food. They got to eat last and they got to eat more food. And I thought that was something that was really neat that they did do that. And I think that my kids both got good basic educations, and Laura chose to follow in our footsteps and be a teacher, and she is a very good teacher. I'm only mildly prejudiced, but I think her principal would say the same thing.
I think the entire school district would say the same thing.
So, and she was very fortunate to have taught at Jefferson with two very good principals over there. So she's had a pretty good, varied school assignment, which she has enjoyed, and the support of the principals that she's had.
Now, you mentioned that your husband, Johnny, he graduated from Harlingen schools? I didn't know
Yes.
that.
He started at Harlingen schools when he was 6 years old. He had moved here from Oklahoma and went to school in Harlingen all of his life. Graduated from Harlingen High School and then worked for the school district. And at a later time, when he was no longer working for the school district, he was on the school board. I think that probably he and I are the only couple who have ever been on the school board. But yes, he did graduate from Harlingen High School.
Talk about, I want you to reflect and talk about the years that you were on the school board now and some of the changes that took place during those years, and help us, again, as a community, better understand that role as a board member.
Okay, I thoroughly enjoyed being on the school board because I felt like I had knowledge of the school district and could share that knowledge and be of some value. I think most people do know that being a school board member is a voluntary thing. It is not a paid position at all, and the board members give a great deal of their time to that, and also preparing for the monthly board meetings. We get an agenda on Fridays, and everybody studies that agenda before you have a board meeting on Tuesday nights. One of the things that changed, and you will remember that I did not really enjoy that, they now tape the school board meetings, and I retired just before that became procedure, and I'm certainly glad because I would not have enjoyed that at all. And we also built this building. We had a major bond issue, and I can remember making many presentations on that because I firmly supported it. And I understand that in the not too far distant future, we're going to have to do something of that nature again. And most certainly, I would be supportive of that because these are our kids. This is our community. We support our kids, and that's a part of it.
Oh, absolutely.
And part of the money comes from the state, but part of it comes locally. And I don't know that it will involve a tax increase because I've not been involved in it. But people paid taxes when my kids were little. And now I think I'm giving back to the community as a taxpayer, as we all are, because we do support our schools. So I'm anxious to see what it will involve, and most certainly I will be happy to help work for that.
Well, it's something I think that everybody's very excited about. It's still a proposed bond election.
Right.
We're still evaluating the needs of the school district, and so until the point the board approves moving forward, after the needs analysis has been done, it will, then we'll look at it more seriously and come up with timelines and so forth. But it is something that we, as part of any school system, you want to improve. You want to help ensure in every way possible that we are preparing our kids for the world of work and higher education and whatever that means. And I think that's something that the entire community can rally around, because in one way or another we all benefit. We sink or swim based upon how well we're doing at preparing our youth for their time on this planet. So very, very critical.
early college high school is one of the new things that I think is very exciting. And I know it's going well. And I think that our kids who go through that program are certainly going to be well prepared. And for them to have the opportunity to be on the TSCC campus, I just think it's very exciting.
It is. Early college high school, again, new, very innovative programs. I think Art Cavazos had a lot to do with that.
He did.
In helping bring that program to fruition. A lot of hard work on behalf of TSTC. So again, it's nice to have TSTC in Harlingen, where we can build those kinds of partnerships, that kind of collaboration that can mean so much to our kids. It's something that a lot of communities simply don't have, that kind of collaboration and that kind of opportunity in their cities.
You know, when we would go to school board meetings, Alan, people were always surprised at the relationship between the city and the school board and school district, and another organization in particular was Boys and Girls Club. And when I would go to a Boys and Girls Club meeting, they'd say, "How do you get that?" I said, "Well, you put a school board on your board, a school member on your board, school board member on your board, and that helps with that relationship." And of course, George McShann's been on the Boys and Girls Club board for many years. But I think we have a good relationship with the city, and hope that that will only continue to grow. And Harlingen has come a long way. We have a much larger enrollment now, but I think we are doing very, very well academically, athletically, and just keep it on going.
Well, I think we are. I mean, there's so many things, positive things happening now. I see a lot happening in the school district in terms of our Harlingen learning community. I mean, that's kind of a new thing also that our superintendent has brought to the team, and helping us all see that we're all part of the picture in terms of vertical, horizontal alignment, the systems of support that we all need, that we're all a part of in one form or another. So there's a lot of positive things that are happening. A really good foundation is being built today to ensure that, when he talks about best in the nation, that is certainly something that starts with a vision and starts with a plan. So, that foundation is being built today. So, again, some very positive things are happening.
I think so. And may it just continue to grow.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you stay involved with the school district, and
I will.
And we know that you will. One of the things that, when I first became involved in the TV station, I was just absolutely surprised to see, rain or shine, didn't matter what the campus. I knew that it didn't matter what it was, there was a volleyball game or a basketball game or a football game. There's one face I'd see at every single game, and that was yours.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, Alan. And of course, this year I've been a little hampered with a broken foot getting up the stands to the football games, but hopefully tomorrow Dr. Maldonado will turn me loose. I've only seen 2 football games at this point. Of course, we were out of town all of September, and that was part of it. But there's still a few left, and I expect to be able to be there.
Let's talk about, see if we can project forward now. And I know 50 years is a long ways out there.
I won't be here, Alan.
But help us look forward. What do you think, based upon what you've seen, where we are today? I know that you're involved in, the way we communicate. All of that's changed so much. What do you think our school system might look like in 50 years?
It's hard for me to imagine. I'm not a very good science fiction person. We'll have another high school, or probably 2 more, maybe 3 more. The valley is almost all grown together now, from one end to the other. I think it'll be even more so by that time. And technology changes all the time now. I could not even begin to imagine what that will be like in 50 years. But hopefully, still, the important person in the classroom is the teacher.
Absolutely.
and that the teachers will be well trained and be able to handle the technology things. I'm glad I don't have to meet the technology standards, even now. I wouldn't do too well with part of them, and you know that. But I think there will be even more, and I certainly hope the day will never come when we don't use textbooks at all, because I still think it's important for kids to have a book in their hands to read from. Yes, it's wonderful to read on screen, but I like that book to be there, just like I like that newspaper to be there in the mornings when I'm drinking my coffee. I don't want to read it on screen.
Right.
But I think there will be even more technology. I think athletics will continue to grow. You know, there's been a time when some people said that there should be a division in the 5A schools, with the larger schools competing against each other and the 5A schools that are not as large competing against each other. That might come to pass. I don't know. That will be something UIL will have to deal with. And they don't make changes very easily. But surely kids can't have their own cars any more than they do now. We'll still have buses to pick up where they need to be. And I think that the kids will have even more knowledge at an earlier age than they do now. Now, those are just pie-in-the-sky thoughts.
Well, those are some very realistic things. I mean, if you think about the amount of information and how we can access it today versus even 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it's just staggering. The amount of information and how quickly it grows, how much more we are all learning about this world and how it works and how we as people can better get along and reach those farther stars. And
how even the very young ones know what to do with the computers and with the cell phones. And just can't imagine how much more of that there will be in 50 years, or what new things will come along that we haven't even visualized yet.
That seems to happen every 5 years, doesn't it?
Yep.
It just changes so much that we couldn't, looking back 5 years ago, would we, even think about the concept of the iPhone, for example, or those kinds of technologies and all the things that you can do with those, even 5 years ago.
You're right. And computers in the classroom, we had very few when they first came out, and thank goodness we have more now.
Can you talk about that briefly, the transition, maybe when the first computers were starting to be used in the school district, what they were used for? And
mostly, to me, Alan, they were used for an individual student. Some of the teachers used them for teaching class, but basically we had 2 or 3 or maybe 4 if you were lucky in a classroom, and the students used those individually. Computer lab, no, we didn't have a computer lab at first at all. And I can remember when I was at Wilson, we had a young lady come to demonstrate a writing lab program. And man, I wanted it for my kids, because I felt like they really needed to have that. And we did get it, but we just didn't have many classrooms, many computers in the classrooms. And I think, to me, they were more used by individuals than for the entire classroom instruction. And then we began to get computer labs on each campus. And since I've not been there now in many years, I don't know how widely used we have computer labs now. We have them in the high schools, I know. And are we still using them all in the elementary schools?
Absolutely.
Good. That was a big thing, to get a computer lab for the kids.
Well, a lot of times today, they're mobile computer labs. They're laptop carts that can be moved around from classroom to classroom.
And that's a new wrinkle, Mr. Alishar. I haven't seen that happen.
Before we wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to reflect on your fondest moments as a parent with your children in the school system, as a teacher, as a principal, and then later as a school board member.
As a parent first. As a parent, I was very pleased that my own 2 children went to the school where I was and did well in middle school and high school. And I think they were both good students. Mark was very athletically inclined. Laura was a Cardette. And as a personal thing, it was a real joy when there was a football game that she was performing as a Cardette and he was playing football. That was a joy as a parent. As a teacher, I just loved what I did. And when my students did well, that was a real joy. And when they competed in something and did well, that was a joy. I can remember, and this was as a principal rather than as a teacher, Nate Morton, when he was about a 4th or 5th grader, went to state to compete in the Elks Lodge basketball competition. That's one of the highlights that I remember as of my students. But I'm a very competitive person. When our students did well, no matter what it was a real joy to me. As an individual, we've already mentioned the two personal things, the being principal of the year and the naming of the school, which was such a significant honor. As a school board member, felt the same way I did as a principal. Anything that the school district did well in, I loved. And if we didn't do well, I didn't give up on them. We'll do better next time. But when our students are recognized for something, I love it. And school board members would tell you that I had a really bad habit when we were presenting awards at school board meeting. I would say, that one's mine, that one was mine, that one was mine. And of course, I wanted to give them their awards. But I just like to see us do our very best in whatever the effort is, whether it's academics, athletics, extracurricular. And I think it's very important that we keep our students involved on an elementary level. Everything that we can do to keep them involved keeps them out of trouble and builds them a little bit more. One of our big things when I was an elementary principal was the Boys and Girls Club Basketball League. At one time, we had 21 teams from Long Elementary, and I went to see every team play at least one time and probably more. I think the more things that we can involve them in, the better it is for them. It helps them in later life because they've got a little more experience with this or with this. But anything that our school district does that's a positive thing, I am supportive of and proud of. And yes, I will continue to go to football, basketball, volleyball games as much as I can, as soon as my foot's well.
Well, you have been absolutely the biggest cheerleader of every single child, every single teacher, every single principal, administrator for the entire school district for many years, and we're so very proud of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. If you have a story to tell about the early years of Harlingen CISD, please give us a call at 430-9530 to schedule your show here on KHGN. I'm Alan Elshire, and it's been a pleasure bringing you Harlingen CISD's Centennial Celebration Show. Thank you.